Spent a lifetime as a lawyer, and I probably spent the last 15 years in the yoga world, and then most of my life studying, various kinds of Eastern systems. And so I'm sort of sitting here wanting to talk about both of these areas. So that's actually a little bit reflected in what I just gave you. So this bookmark is just information about the various legal books I've written on these topics, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. And this card actually, when I started teaching yoga philosophy, this was the very first thing I came up with, as sort of a way to structure talking about the Yoga Sutras. So I thought I'd just give this to you so you can have these sort of really beautiful quotes to maybe balance out all of the legal stuff that we'll be talking about, so you don't feel unnecessarily burdened or oppressed or confused by the law. That's the main topic for this evening. So, anyways, from a legal point of view, my background is corporate and securities and technology and intellectual property. So I used to be a partner in one of the largest law firms in the country, and then after that I went to Microsoft for 6 or 7 years. And then after that I realized I didn't have to do corporate law anymore. And so I began to sort of think about, what would be next after sort of a lifetime in the law. So that sort of was the legal track. On the yoga side, I discovered yoga in 2000 when I was at Microsoft. And Microsoft is an extremely high-pressure, tense, adversarial, I think in many times, violent, environment to live in. And so this produces a lot of stress, and I turned to yoga as a way to sort of deal with how all this, negativity was affecting me personally. And then it became a little more interesting because then the issue then became, how do I take, yoga off the mat and bring it into Microsoft and use yoga to make those situations better? And that, I think, is the real challenge and the beauty of yoga, if you can take it off the mat. Because it's fairly easy to be spiritual and beautiful and compassionate in here, but can you take it out there when things get really, really tough? So I began to take yoga into Microsoft and found a lot of amazing benefits that came from those experiences. So I fell madly in love with yoga and practiced just all the time for 5 or 6 years. But then after 5 or 6 years, kind of like, it's the old blues tune, the thrill was gone. Yeah. And I just kind of got bored with it and disenchanted and began to just think that what I was doing wasn't authentic. I began to think what I was doing wasn't real. And I began to think what I was doing wasn't even really yoga, because I couldn't get anyone to tell me exactly what on earth yoga really was, And I asked a whole lot of people and went to a lot of workshops and a lot of ashrams and India and everything else. So I decided to stop practicing altogether until I could figure out what yoga was and what the authentic path was. Because if I couldn't be authentic and real about it, I just wasn't going to do it at all. So I lucked into the first yoga philosophy program at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And that was an amazing program, just 6 months, total immersion in yoga philosophy. That's where I met Eric. He was in that program. And one of the amazing things that came out of that was when we got to the discussion of the Yoga Sutras, there's probably 15 of us in this class, and most people had really deep, long relationships with yoga. No one had a clue what the Yoga Sutras meant. I mean, everyone had lots and lots of copies of the Yoga Sutras, on the bookshelf, but nobody really read them, nobody really understood them, nobody really practiced them, and that really struck me as like a tragedy, because that's kind of our key text book in many ways as yoga practitioners. So things happen, and I came upon this idea to write my own book on the Yoga Sutras, which I did. I spent about 4 years writing this book, and partly it was to understand what yoga was. I felt that exercise would really help. Partly it was to write a new kind of a sutra book that would open up the sutras to people like us, rather than academics, in ivory towers. So what I did is I used book design and I used imagery as a way to illustrate the Yoga Sutras, and then put that out there, and it's turned out to be a very successful book. Oh, I'm glad that's it right there. I don't have one with me yet. You have it? Oh, wonderful. Okay.
So
Yeah.
Eric said we had to get a book, but we chose yours.
What? I'll talk to him about that.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
hard to resist.
Well, thank you.
Because it looks good on the bookshelf, even if we never open it. No.
Right. What I hear all the time is a lot of people leave that book on like their nightstand, and they'll just open it up and like read a sutra, read a quote, or look at a picture before they go to bed. It just helps sleep. So anyways, I put that out there, and it never dawned on me that people had asked me to talk about the sutras of yoga philosophy. So I started getting invitations, and I thought, I struggled if I should do that. Finally decided that I should. So I started giving these workshops on yoga philosophy, and then started getting invited to teacher training programs to talk about philosophy. But then what happened is I started creating relationships with studios and teachers. Everyone knew I was a lawyer, so I started getting asked all these legal questions, and I realized that no one in the yoga community has a clue about law and how that affects studios and how that affects teachers. And then I created a relationship with Yoga Alliance and I taught at their Business of Yoga conferences. And now what I'm doing is I'm on their committee, which is, we are rewriting the code of conduct. And that will affect you directly. And we'll talk about that later on this evening. The other thing that we're doing a lot of work around is to change we are working on changing best practices in terms of the way certain situations are dealt with in the classroom. So we'll talk about that. And we're doing a lot of work around this whole question of independent contractors versus employees, which is sort of an existential question that you'll have to answer at some point in your life, which is, who are you? What are you? Are you an employee or are you an independent contractor? And that's a hugely important question. So I've been doing a lot of work with Yoga Alliance, and they've given me really an amazing platform to sort of put some of this new thinking out into the community. And they just a few weeks ago, they sent out an email basically sponsoring one of my books on independent contractors, and then sort of another one on essential issues that you need to know about as a teacher or as a studio. But we'll talk about all of that stuff, here. So it's been a great partnership with Yoga Alliance. It's really given me an amazing platform to sort of educate the community about the law and about the business, because the whole point, the reason I'm doing this is if you guys build viable teaching businesses, that means you're teaching more yoga out there. And the more yoga that gets taught, the more people get the message, and I think we end up with a better world. That's really what I'm trying to do is support yoga businesses and yoga teachings by doing all of this stuff. So that's kind of my background in a nutshell. It's been a pretty busy couple of years as the sort of the teaching yoga philosophy and teaching these workshops has sort of really just blossomed, and then a lot of the Yoga Alliance stuff has been very, very time consuming but valuable at the same time. Okay. Before I get started, I wanted to give you two resources. This one, The Yogi Entrepreneur by Darren Main. He's a friend of mine, and he runs the teacher training program up at Yoga Tree. And this is a really good book. And it's written really for teachers. The Yogi Entrepreneur, A Guide to Earning a Mindful Living Through Yoga by Darren Main.
Oh dear.
Yeah, you know Darren? Yeah, tremendous guy. But this is actually quite a good book. The other, Yoga Morality, Ancient Teachings at a Time of Global Crisis by Jorg Feuerstein. I'm sure Eric has talked about him, correct?
Right.
Yeah, probably not this particular book, but I'm sure you've heard Feuerstein from Eric. And this, if you're interested in where ethics,
George.
yeah, Feuerstein, Feuerstein. It's Georg Feuerstein, and he's really one of the greatest, Western philosophers that we have had. He passed away, I think, 2 years ago, but just a giant in the field of writing about yoga philosophy. But if you're interested in where morality fits into yoga, this is really the best book that I have been able to find. And I suppose one of the questions he asked is, why are the yamas and the niyamas in the Yoga Sutras in the first place? What does it have to do with practicing yoga? And then he also sort of extends yoga morality into the way that we relate to the world as yoga practitioners, including environmental issues. So it's quite an amazing book. I totally recommend it. Okay, any questions at all before we get started? So this, treat this as a totally informal, open forum to ask any legal business question you might have of a lawyer, and it's free. I won't send you a bill for $500 an hour. I promise. Okay? So feel free to ask questions. So let's start with some of the current events that are out there that you need to know about. So the first data point, and I think this is actually huge, and it's one reason why I'm sitting here, is that yoga is now a $27 billion business. And more than 15 million people are practicing yoga in 2012.
In the United States.
In the United States. And so what this means, it means that a lot of money is flowing into yoga. And it means that there's a lot of mainstream attention that's being given to yoga. I mean, we see yoga stuff in ads all the time. We see it on TV. We see it in movies. We see it everywhere. And so this actually has had a negative effect from the standpoint that I'm seeing more and more disputes within the yoga community because now there's money to fight over. Whereas historically there was no money whatsoever in yoga to fight over. So now we're seeing more disputes between studios and more disputes between teachers and studios. And I think that the business is at a point where there's enough money that lawyers are starting to get involved more and more and more. And if there's, one of the most important things I want to leave with you is you want to avoid being involved with adversarial lawyers at all costs. Because it will be in a very, very expensive, painful, situation. So we really want to seek to prevent getting involved in conflicts and disputes and prevent getting involved in situations where a lawyer might pop up, on the other side. If you were asking me, say, last year, or 2 years ago, what I thought sort of the biggest source of liability for teachers was, I probably would say, personal injury. Because that's what you think of, what you're really worried about is you're thinking, if somebody gets hurt in my class, can they sue me? That's what you're thinking. And we'll talk about that. But I don't think that's actually the biggest source of liability and problems that I'm seeing today. It's really around independent contractors and employees and your relationships to the studios where you're going to be teaching. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. But I think that's really creating more trouble than personal liability. I'm also seeing a lot of confusion and conflicts around intellectual property issues, interestingly enough, copyright and trademark, and infringement of domain names of trademark interests held by other people. And this can cause a yoga teacher a tremendous amount of trouble. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think those kinds of things are where you'll most likely get into trouble, and not so much, I don't think, personal injury. But we'll talk about the ways that you can build, barriers, the ways you can protect yourself against a personal injury, lawsuit or problem that could evolve, in one of your classes. So let's talk about some of the big things that are happening that are sort of current developments. And probably the one that I wrote a blog post about this about a couple of months ago, and I've spoken with Yoga Alliance and a lot of people. This is probably the hottest issue I've seen in a long time, and it's ASCAP music licensing. Do you guys know what ASCAP is?
Yeah.
You did. Have you heard about this problem?
No, I don't know.
So ASCAP is a very large company that represents over 500,000 musicians, songwriters, and music labels. And what they do is they have agents that go out all over the place, and any time that they see a public performance of music that has been produced by someone they represent, they hit that business up for license fees because they are infringing the copyright in the music that musician or label or publisher holds. Now, I guess about a year ago, some genius at ASCAP got the idea or figured out, maybe this person went to a yoga class, probably what happened, figured out somehow that in yoga studios, teacher comes in, plugs in, their phone, launches the playlist, and they're just playing whatever music they want to play. Well, a lot of that music is by popular artists represented by ASCAP. And so from their point of view, that's a public performance, and royalties are owed to ASCAP. So they started sending cease and desist letters to yoga studios saying, either you pay us license fees for performing this music, or we're going to sue you. That's it.
Wow.
I just see.
You can't even purchase a CD.
You're not.
Purchase the music on your phone and as a teacher play it.
You're actually not purchasing the music. You are licensing that music. You do not own the music that you think that you're buying. You're actually licensing the music. You're licensing.
Playing it to other people. What's the difference between doing it in the yoga studio and doing it at your home with like a party where you've got all your friends there?
Well, public performance plus a business. Same thing in bars. Same thing in companies that sort of DJ wedding companies, festivals. Every place you can imagine, it's a public performance.
That'd be a good reason for quiet yoga classes.
Yeah.
Well,
This would support that movement.
yeah.
Because it's AS down.
Yeah.
Because they are. Howard, you then?
What'd you say?
Set them down.
Yeah.
Just the fact that someone
Yes.
pays
I mean, it's just a
for
money
the
thing for
event.
them.
No, it's
Play
going to
into
musicians,
whether or not
trying to
public
support
performance.
themselves.
Okay, I got that.
It's their artistic rights.
So here's the way that it sort of has evolved. Is a yoga studio cannot fight ASCAP. I mean, it's $1 billion corporation, and they have armies of lawyers, and they do this every day. So you're not going to fight ASCAP. So what the studios do is they are paying the royalties. I mean, that's sort of the reality of the situation. So right now the studios are paying up, and it's sort of an epidemic that's going around the country. Well, there's also two other companies like ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC that are going to start doing the same thing. So studios are going to get hit by 3 different companies for 3 different, license fees because teachers are playing infringing music in the classroom. And you might think, well, why do I care? This is the studio's problem. Well, it's probably not going to be the studio's problem. I think what you'll probably start seeing is if you actually are indeed an independent contractor rather than an employee, which most of you probably are going to be, then guess whose obligation it is to play non-infringing music in this yoga studio? Yours.
Is there any music that we can play?
Yes, there's certain things you can do. You can certainly play your own live music. If you are a musician, you can play the music that you may have created yourself. You can also play music that is in the public domain. And music in the public domain is really hard to determine if it's in fact in the public domain or not. But basically just think, really old music. But from the standpoint of most of what you hear, like, I don't know, Krishna Das, totally, that's infringing if you just come in and play Krishna Das in a studio like this, that sort of thing. So it puts the studios and the teachers in a bad situation, and I think that what we may see is that some studios are going to start allocating these license costs, down to the teachers. So if you hear this from a studio, don't be surprised. This is where it's coming from, is they're getting hit by these music licensing companies. And some people say, well, what if I just play my Spotify playlist? And there is this notion of blanket license, but unfortunately, your contract with Spotify, your terms of use that you've signed but you didn't realize you signed it when you signed up for their service, it prohibits playing their music in a commercial context. It prohibits playing their music as a public performance. So you can't even use their license. Apple right now is in some kind of negotiation, pre-litigation thing with ASCAP over iTunes. But there may be some possibility that Apple's trying to negotiate a blanket license with ASCAP. So if that turns out really, really, really well, and we don't know yet, there may be some hope that we could actually play an iTunes playlist in here. But who can say where that...
Which would mean anything that's
Well,
in your iTunes playlist, right?
Well, that you buy from the Apple Store. I'm sorry, yeah. Any music you buy from iTunes, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it would be an Apple...
Not something that you just download.
No. It would be music that you license from Apple
No,
through
I
iTunes.
iTunes, but
Yeah.
my iTunes library has all my music.
Yeah. No, it would be music that you license through Apple's, iTunes
And
store.
then would the person who comes to your class who potentially works for ASCAP come and look at your iTunes and like no?
No, that's not really the way they operate. What they do is they target industries. Like bars is like a classic example. They know pretty much all bars play, infringing music in the bar, so they just send out these letters to all the bars, and the bars, pay up. They figured this out. They figured out this is going on in the yoga world, so they're just sending out all these cease and desist letters to the studios. They're not going to come around and look at your phone, but you may do a little negotiating with ASCAP if you're the studio owner, but most likely what will happen is that studio will have to pay some sort of a license fee to ASCAP. Then the question is, does the studio just eat that, or do they seek to spread it around all the teachers?
So is it would that be like a blanket royalty fee so that
Yeah.
they don't actually know which songs?
No. Yeah, no. It's
Which
a
artists?
it's a blanket fee. Yeah, and it's keyed to the number of students per month. But what's kind of ugly, and this whole thing is extremely ugly, it's an annual fee, so you have to pay the fee each year, and it's got a thing in it where it increases each year. So it's, it's not a negotiation, it's a demand with a lawsuit, backing them up.
Have you
So-
seen it hit in the peninsula yet?
Yeah,
Where?
Yeah.
You say?
Yeah.
I said, has he
I have
seen it?
I have personal knowledge that one of the places where I teach has been hit. Yeah. So it's here. So yeah.
Well, you can go first.
Please.
Just out of curiosity, are there any artists who have opted out of the demand for royalties? I think it was it Hootie and the Blowfish? There was some musical group, so when we say everyone, you can record my music, it's you're the
Yeah,
dead in it.
sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, all musicians are not represented by ASCAP. So what you could do if you're the studio owner or the teacher, you could actually go into the ASCAP database. You can run a search, and you could say, I'm not, you can cleanse your playlist of every artist that's in their database, and then you could say, okay, as a teacher, I'm completely clean, I'm completely non-infringing. So either Yoga Studio, you can't tax me, or neither can you, ASCAP. But you'd have to be, very clear about what you're doing. Yes.
I'm just curious, just because this is kind of business-related workshop.
Yeah.
And I'm a musician, and I've often thought a path I'm potentially interested in taking is developing music specifically for yoga classes.
Mm-hmm.
Could you see this to be like an opportunity to develop a whole industry based on
Yeah.
music
I do.
that any yoga class
I
could
do.
play that has various like shavasana music,
Yeah.
vinyasa music, meditation music, whatever, like that just studios could sign up for?
I totally do, and I've actually thought about this myself. Is you could have a catalog of non-infringing music that's either originally created by artists that or music that's in the public domain, or music that absolutely is not in the database of BMI, SCAP, or CSAC, and you could say, okay, this is clean music, and you could actually build a business around that. I think also a lot of electronic music doesn't tend to be represented by these guys, so I think that could be a pretty fertile area where you could get music that is sort of outside, the domain of these kinds of agencies. Yeah.
What about music from other countries?
Well, that's where CSAC comes in. So they represent
okay.
musicians from other countries. Now they're smaller and they seem to be less aggressive. And so right now, if you can just avoid ASCAP, then you're doing really well. So you would be much safer by using music from a foreign country, provided it's not like the Beatles or something. But that won't work. But some fairly obscure musician from some foreign country, you're going to be much potentially on safer ground than some American popular artist.
So does CSAC represent the European Union?
And it's not a matter of the union. It's a matter of musicians and
Musicians in the European
Oh, yeah,
or
yeah.
how does the European Union
yeah.
come into all of this?
Didn't have anything to do with the European Union. It's more around different agencies tend to specialize in different kinds of music. Yeah. Okay, so this is bubbling, pretty ferociously on the stove, and it's a national problem. Because I've sent out the blog post, I got all kinds of stuff from all over the country, and Yoga Alliance has just gotten flooded with people, asking questions about this. So it's definitely here.
Okay, one question.
Please.
If a company agrees to pay a fee, is it per studio or per blanket? In other words, like Safeway has elevator music. Do they pay by the store, or do they pay just a generalized fee?
Well, Safeway probably has a license for the entire conglomerate, but that's where Muzak comes in. They license music from Muzak and pay those guys a fee, but they're probably not playing ASCAP music in there. But say for like UN Studio, she would pay a license fee, and then what that covers is anything that you guys play in here in your yoga class,
But
for
it's specific to this
Oh yeah,
location.
specific to here, yeah.
So we should
If you
ask.
opened another studio in Redwood City,
They would hit her for another fee because it's more students because
Okay,
there's two
okay,
studios.
so it's per
Yeah.
student.
Or, I mean, like Yoga Tree, for example, could potentially negotiate a contract for all of their studios.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
It doesn't have to just be per studio, but it sounds like it would be more than just for one.
Well, sure, because what they'll see is that she has 2 studios. And they'll go, oh, we have 2 studios, we have more students than just 1 studio, so therefore we're going to charge you a higher fee because it's based upon the number of students, total number of students. And then Yoga Tree that's got, what, 7 or 8, they've got a whole lot more students, so they get to pay a higher fee. So, I know, I mean, this is a case where the sort of the mainstreaming of yoga is causing us problems because it brings us to the attention of entities like ASCAP that turn around and hit us for money, and we have to deal with it. So this is just a perfect example of where yoga is sort of running into, the real world. So, okay?
I don't want to segue too much, but I'm wondering how this relates to both online entities and to education. And I'm kind of on a hold up on a project I'd like to do, and it's more related to movies than music.
Mhm.
But I have some material that I want to put up around movies,
Mhm.
and everything in movie is copyrighted.
Sure.
Absolutely
Yeah.
everything.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't put my hands on anything.
Right.
And I also teach
Mhm.
in a university setting,
Mhm.
and I use it there.
Yeah.
But I think online would be a totally different story.
Yeah, unless you could come up with some sort of fair use type argument, but which is hard to do because, again, you're not negotiating with ASCAP. I mean, they have a gigantic stick,
Mhm.
and you're just you.
Right.
And so it's very, very, very hard to get
Unless
a
you
good.
just opt out and do your own thing, right?
Yeah, what you could do is you say, you know what, we're going to go silent in here.
Yeah.
We're going to go silent, or we're going to have just teachers can bring in a guitar,
Right.
and that's it.
Yeah.
And then you could beat them back if you took that position.
And in the past, education, copyright seemed a little bit more loose with education, but I'm wondering how that applies to online education.
Yeah, same thing. It's a fair use concept. If it's for educational purposes, distinct from commercial purposes, then you can escape some of these restrictions.
But if Alyssa creates her own music for yoga studios
Hmm?
and markets it, you also want to be protected by infringement of other studios using your music without paying license fees.
What do you mean without paying license fees?
Well, so you develop this line of music for Shavasanas that are original music, and you get them out to a few studios, and some people think they're great, and they say, "Hey, can you send me that one?" And someone sends an MP3 file of yours to someone else, who then plays it in a studio without having paid for it in any way.
Right.
So
I mean,
you
that's
need to
happening all the
protect-
time right now anyways with all music. So I would probably try to get some sort of programmer to figure out a way where they have to be like logged into our program in order to play the music or something. Or there's certain things that I think you can't avoid. But yeah, ideally,
You have to
you
protect
create
yourself,
some
that's
sort
all.
of thing where,
Sure.
Mhm.
you're protecting the business.
Welcome to the world of music.
Right, exactly.
Okay, second big development. The Yoga Glow patent on video recording yoga in the classroom. So here's what's going on out there. I see a huge movement of teachers putting their asana sequences, their classes online. Because obviously you can reach a much greater audience that's global and 24/7 rather than, running around, yoga studios all the time and teaching. So lots of teachers are wanting to put their classes, online, and then there are sites out there that sort of aggregate these classes, and then they charge people, to watch them, and then they give the yoga teacher, a certain percent of the royalties come in. Like Grokker is a good one. You guys know Grokker? You should maybe check Grokker. That's actually becoming a very popular site where teachers are putting their classes, online, and then they.
It's also like hit play yoga or something like that.
Yeah, I've heard.
Probably a bunch of small ones.
Yeah.
My yoga online.
Yeah, same general idea. So there's a lot of that. So Yoga Glow is one of these kinds of companies. What they did, however, is they went out and they got a patent around the way that a yoga class is video recorded in a studio.
Oh,
And,
gosh.
and what they have done is they've sent out cease and desist letters that have sought to prevent teachers and studios from displaying yoga classes that have been videoed because they say that they are infringing their patent.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, I know.
And what's the patent?
The patent is this. So let's say that, what is your name? I'm sorry. Please? Tamal. Yeah, Tamal. I'm sorry. I couldn't get your name right last time. Let's say you're teaching the class. And so the way that most people think of setting up the classroom and the camera would be down there shooting at you. The students would be on both sides, right? That way the camera has a clear view of the teacher. Students are sitting on both sides. That is what they got a patent on, is just that. And so they are actually fairly aggressively going out and sending cease and desist letters against studios and teachers that are displaying videos that are recorded using that same setup. So
If it's only videos, not pictures that they've taken?
it's about video. It's about video recording yoga classes. So
Is that
I
a
would
methodology?
Excuse me?
Is that a methodology? I mean, there's different categories of patents.
Yeah, I'm not sure what class that they actually use for this. I mean, I've seen analyses of this by some patent lawyers, and it's a pretty weak patent because it's probably not sufficiently original to get a patent, and there's also prior art out there. But nevertheless, they have this patent. So the message to you is, know that this is going on, because I don't think it's a particularly yogically oriented thing for a company to do. But if you intend to video classes and put them online, you need to understand how this patent works so that you don't infringe it. Okay?
Is that the same as like how a lot of people are just, like a teacher is just recording herself doing like say a sun salutation and then putting that on her website so people can get a feel for what she looks like? Is that the
Yeah, see, that wouldn't be infringing because it doesn't involve the students
Okay.
in this specific configuration that they came up with.
So is that the only thing that you'd be infringing upon, is that configuration?
Yeah, that's right. So
For now, like.
yeah. So
you can
theoretically,
edit a video.
yeah, you could have the students in a circle. You could have the camera.
Unless that's been patented.
Yeah, so far I don't think it has, but
Yeah.
who knows what these guys are up to?
Right.
Yeah.
How do we keep up on
Yeah.
what?
Oh, we'll find out for sure when the
Can't
patent
have
is
a
issued.
video camera in the same
Yeah.
room.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just the teacher, there's not
That's
students in.
that's a silly patent.
Through a window.
I know, but you have to know this because you don't want to infringe a patent. And what I worry about is that other yoga businesses will also start patenting various things like that to use, defensively if they get hit by some company like Yoga Glow. So I just hate to see, patent wars, breaking out in the yoga world. But this is like the first step in this, and I just don't think this is remotely a positive development. But it's a fact, and we need to be aware of it. Okay. And Yoga Alliance has been following this thing pretty carefully. So if there's more developments, you'll get it, in the newsletter. Yes.
Is there a library of yoga video patents that you could reference?
Oh.
I mean, because, I don't know, one of the videos that I've seen was the instructor in front and two students on either side behind them, kind of imitating what they were doing.
Yeah.
Is that patented?
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, not. I mean,
How do you
right?
find out?
Yeah. Well, when a patent is filed, it's a matter of public record. When it's issued, it's a matter of public record, and people sort of follow this. So it'll be known if there are subsequent patents that are issued in the future. But right now, all that seems to have happened is a patent's particular configuration. But there'd be no reason why they wouldn't patent other kinds as well, you know. So we'll stay tuned. Stay
So
tuned.
don't do a video because it might be a patented
Well,
configuration.
I wouldn't go that far, but you need to know what Yoga Glow is doing, and don't do the video their way. That's really the message. I know I think this is a very unfortunate, you know, situation, but I suppose it's not surprising because again, this is the function of, you know, money and growth, you know, flowing into the yoga world, you know. And this company, this Yoga Glow, is, you know, they're in San Francisco, so what they're probably doing is taking, you know, a startup technology mentality to the yoga business.
I thought they were in LA.
I think they're in San. Maybe they've got a branch or multiple offices, but yeah. So, anyways, just be aware.
You know, this is so, I'm a teacher, and at the end of the year, my students, for their promotion activities, all do a quote. We do quotes every week, and they analyze a quote. One of the quotes one of the students is using happens to be from Jonas Salk, who in 1954, after developing the polio vaccine, was asked in some sort of an interview, are you going to patent the vaccine? And he said, can you patent the sun? You know, it's just such a different mentality
Right.
when you think about it. It's so
I know.
oxymoronic in this particular community that it makes it even that much more egregious because of, look, everyone's allowed to make a business and everyone's allowed to make money, but it seems
I know.
just it's so much more egregious when it's coming from a community that's supposed to be about, you know, sharing.
I know. But there's definitely certain segments of the community that are not about sharing, that's for sure. But there's some good news. There's some good news in all of this. So Bikram, some time ago, got a copyright on his 26 asanas, right? On the Bikram sequence.
Right.
He got a copyright on that. And he's an extremely, you know, litigious character, so he was using that, you know, as a way to basically prevent anyone doing anything remotely similar to those sequences on the theory it was copyright infringement. Well, last year the Copyright Office actually reversed its decision, said it made a mistake, and said that Bikram, in fact, is not entitled to a copyright in the 26 asanas. So that's actually a really nice development. So there's a little bit of good news for
So
you.
does that mean that you can now teach Beaker at studios without being Beaker certified?
Absolutely not. He will sue you in a second because it's still, you know,
What if you call it hot yoga and use those 26 poses?
he has gone after hot yoga studios that use the same temperature, that use some of the sequences, that have any kind of look and feel with his business. He's extremely aggressive. And so anything you want to do in the hot yoga world, you need to navigate around Bikram, you know, as much as you possibly can, because he'll just hit people a lawsuit, you know, at a drop of a hat.
So, how does it help us that his 26 poses are no longer copyrighted?
It may not help you whatsoever if you don't have any sort of a practice that is like Bikram's, you know. But there's a whole lot of people out there that are in hot yoga, in the hot yoga world, and just because they're hot yoga, that sort of puts them, you know, at a little bit of risk. And to the extent that some of those studios and teachers are teaching some of those asanas, you know, because a lot of those are pretty standard moves, right? He had ammunition because he had this copyright. So it's really easy to hit anyone with the cease and desist for infringement of his copyright. So now his legal case, you know, his legal causes of action are much, much weaker.
How long ago did he have copyright?
You know, I think that copyright's probably 3 or 4 or 5 years old. It's been out there for a while.
And they can wait 3 years and say, now we're going to take it away from you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure what all the procedural, you know, moves were, but
So
Someone must have contested it or.
It could be, yeah. Yeah, it could be.
Litigation.
Yeah. There was one of the community yoga studios, I want to say in the East Coast, got sued by Bikram over this, and they went ahead and raised a bunch of money and took it to court, and maybe that's how it came to light. There was a lawsuit, and one studio actually stood up and went to the courtroom, and they won. So maybe that's what came out of that action. But I think that's a good thing.
Copyright.
Yeah.
Steve.
Yeah. Next current development you didn't know about. So right now, Yoga Alliance has a code of conduct which is really fuzzy-wuzzy, and it's not anything they could actually enforce against a teacher. And Yoga Alliance has been under a lot of pressure for years to do something about sexual scandal and misbehavior in the yoga community. But they have no ability to do anything because they don't have a clear code of conduct. And they don't have a code of conduct that actually they could enforce against some person or some studio who is acting in a bad way. So they've decided to write a new code of conduct, and almost certainly it will be something that could be enforced against someone that broke it. But all that, this is sort of in process. And later on tonight, I'll tell you what this new code will look like, because I'm actually writing it. Leave it, the lawyer gets to do all the writing. But we've been on the committee working on this thing for about a year, so there's a whole bunch of people that are sort of working on this effort. So I think it'll be a pretty important change in your relationship to Yoga Alliance. Okay? Let's see. The next one is they have a new best practice around how teachers should deal with students who have pre-existing medical conditions. Like what is the best set of practices you should follow to protect yourself legally if that student aggravates that condition in your class? And then sort of part of that is touch and how we deal with touch. And that we just completed that best practice a few months ago, so that will be sort of put out into the community pretty soon as well. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to sort of let you know that I think is really an important current development that's happening out in the community. Yes.
So while you're saying that, how enforceable or how much of a legal document really are those waivers that you sign when you go into, as a student, into a new studio, and if the studio has you sign waivers, what is that piece of paper worth?
Funny you should ask, because that document, that essential packet, that has the new model form of release. Mm-hmm. That I spent a lot of time with a bunch of lawyers and the whole insurance companies putting that together. So we'll get to that in a minute. But that's actually a really big deal.
Well, because we sign things as consumers all the time, or as the business end of it too, but that doesn't mean it's enforceable, and
Right.
It doesn't mean it carries any weight if it's deemed to be unfair on any one side. It's just an exercise in futility, essentially.
Right. Well, let's so before we turn to liability, so it's sort of any questions about sort of current developments that's happening?
What about teachers who don't pay Yoga Alliance dues and still teach?
That's perfectly fine. Then you're not subject to anything Yoga Alliance does. you're not subject to their code of conduct or best practices or anything. You're just out there doing your thing, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to be a member of Yoga Alliance.
Right. And does Yoga Alliance offer any protection, or what are people's reasons or advantages for joining
Yeah.
being Yoga Alliance?
I guess, and maybe some of you have a view on this, as well. I think it's a couple of things. One, there's a lot of employers of yoga teachers who will only hire teachers who are registered with Yoga Alliance because it gives them some sort of comfort that teacher has met some, level of training.
Mhm.
And you've got your 200 and 500 and what is it, 800, is it 800 or 1,000? Whatever the next level is. But anyways, it's some assurance that teacher's at a certain level of training. So I think without it, in some cases you might find it a little more difficult to get a teaching position. The other thing is they do have a fair number of resources that they're providing for teachers, which they haven't done historically, which has been one of the criticisms against them, is they just sort of taxed the teachers and didn't do anything. But they've got a new executive director, they've got a new staff, and so they're actually working really hard to give teachers benefits. Like they have preferential rates around insurance, and they've got lots and lots of resources that they have to help teachers develop their teaching practice.
Teachers union.
That's a different question.
So that might be incentive for teachers to pay dues every year
Yeah.
after their initial training.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean,
I would say the biggest thing is that, because I've never been asked by the studios hiring me if I'm a member.
If
but
you're
it's more
current,
like for my own
but they
business
do want to
card.
know that you've been certified.
What's that?
But they do want to know that you've been
Well,
certified.
yeah, you have to have
200,
been certified, but
500.
that doesn't,
They're not gonna check. they're not
but
gonna
that's
check.
different than being a member of Yoga Alliance.
Mhm.
To be more, I mean, I would say it's more like a personal choice for your own credit, credibility on your business card or your website. But maybe there are a lot of studios that ask for that, I don't know. Like even Yoga Tree doesn't ask for that, and they're like a big studio.
That's interesting. Yeah. Because I hear like pretty much all the gyms kind of require that.
Well, I
And-
work at Planet Granite, and that's a gym, and they.
Are they Club One?
No.
So they didn't ask you for that? Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So
I
it,
mean, those are just
Could they
two,
look her
I'm
up?
saying.
Do they have like a database where they could look her up?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They probably don't.
Yeah. They do. So yeah, I mean, it's not a requirement. If you feel it's beneficial to you, then you can do it. If you don't feel that it's so, you can certainly go out and get good jobs teaching, and you don't need to do that. So it's totally your choice. Okay, so let's talk about liability. How you protect yourself from liability, which comes from somebody getting hurt in your class and deciding to sue you. Okay. And I came up with like the 3-limb strategy. After Kriya Yoga, Patanjali's sort of 3-limbed yoga. So the first is the release. So here's a true and false question. I'm a yoga teacher, and all the studios where I teach require students to sign the waiver.
Right.
So I'm protected. True or false? False.
Yeah.
Why?
Because they sign the
Studio,
waiver.
not the teacher. It's the.
If you're incorporated or you're not,
What
you're
you
sued.
signed is protecting the studio, it's not protecting the teacher if the teacher's not an employee.
Interesting. Other theories?
You're signing, you're not holding anybody liable. When you sign that, that means whatever happens, I'm not gonna hold anybody liable.
So you are protected if the students sign it.
Yeah.
You are okay. You're saying that you're protected. You're saying you're not protected.
Okay, I'm gonna say this is like you have a case in law that goes to court, and you lose, but now you're able to take a case against an individual as opposed to an entity, so like, individual
Personal
Well, I
liability.
think that
What do you think?
The form just release it's like, as long as there's no obvious fault on the teacher's side, it's your fault if you get injured. I think that's kind of thing. But if the student can prove that there's something wrong with the teacher's way of teaching or something, I think they can still sue the teacher even though they waive their.
Oh, so even though they signed a contract saying, I won't sue you if I get hurt in your class, I can sue you anyway.
Yeah, that's
Good.
that's my understanding.
Any theories over here? We got all kinds of theories.
Everybody got a waiver form, what is?
I think you're protected.
You're saying you're protected, okay. What's your theory?
If you're the instructor, you're not protected.
Even if I come to your class, I sign a form that says, I will not sue you if I get hurt in your class.
No, because if you get hurt, you'll sue.
Yeah.
But doesn't the waiver, if I sign the contract,
The
it
waiver
just
doesn't
says,
protect me.
why not?
Um,
I'm
The
signing a
risk of the
contract.
participant.
I've seen instances where people have signed waivers
Uh-huh.
for horse-related
Uh-huh.
activities.
Uh-huh.
They're injured seriously,
Uh-huh.
waiver doesn't help.
Yeah, somehow the lawyers.
They get,
Yeah,
So-
There's a way if someone wants to sue, there's a
they go
way.
after no matter what.
Okay.
Somehow. That's how I was taught.
It doesn't mean that they win, but they might settle along the way.
All right, so here, can I see that?
Yes.
Tell us.
Do tell us, yeah.
Yeah, so let's see what this one says. Okay. Need to talk to UN about this.
After serious discussion.
Okay, so here's the way it works. First of all, if someone, well, let me back up. Anyone can sue anyone else anytime for anything. That's rule number one. Rule number two. The release is a defense against the lawsuit. It's a defense. Okay? Now, the question is, will that defense act to bar or end or terminate that lawsuit? And it will, provided that it is effective, it's got the right language in it, and it's enforceable, sort of as a matter of law. But it's got to have the right parties in the release. Now, what I do is I travel around. I travel a lot, and I like to drop by yoga studios where I'm traveling, just to kind of, take classes and see what's happening. I read these things because I'm strange. I would say probably 2/3 of these completely fail to protect the teacher because the teacher is not included as a party to the release.
Yeah.
The release only releases the studio and the studio's owners. It doesn't cover the teachers. So if you're out there teaching at different studios, look at the release and see, first of all, does it include the teachers? If it doesn't include the teachers, then you have nothing. In the legal world, that's just called going naked. You have no protection whatsoever.
And
So-
then, does it matter if you're a contractor or an employee?
Yeah, actually, it does matter in kind of a technical way. And here's the way that it goes. If you're an employee of UN's, I take your class and I get hurt, I can sue you and I can sue her. Because she's responsible for your actions because you are her employee. And if you are a negligent teacher, she should have known. And because you're an employee, she actually is controlling the way that you perform that job because you're an employee. If you're an independent contractor, I don't really have much of a cause of action against UN at all because you have a completely different relationship. Because of that relationship, she's not controlling you. She's basically renting this space to you. So technically, I can just sue you. You may not really care because you're going to get sued either way. So it's really more about UN and not about you. Okay? But from your point of view, when you go to a studio to teach, read this release. And first of all, make sure teachers are included. That's the first thing. If teachers aren't included, you need to talk to the studio.
Would it say it?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll say it. Usually what it says is that, I, Gary Kissia, yoga student, hereby release, Prajna Healing Arts Yoga Studio, its owners, its employees, its independent contractors, its teachers, on and on and on, That's what it should say. If it just says, I, Gary Kissia, hereby release Prajna, Yoga Studio from any lawsuits, then you as a teacher have no coverage whatsoever.
I've read them where they say, like, it's no fault of the studios or the instructors. Does it have to say specifically independent contractors as well as employees? Or but if it just says instructors, that seems like a...
Yeah, see, that probably isn't going to help you sleep at night. You're an independent contractor, so it needs to say, it needs to say that. It needs to say that. So that's the first thing you need to do. Second thing you need to do, a lot of these releases I see, I call them one-sentence wonders. You can just tell. It's just some junk they got off the internet. It's 2 or 3 sentences long. It will do nothing to protect you. Okay? So what you really want to do is look at the form of release that I gave you in this book. And there's a form for teachers and a form for studios. And what you want is for that release to look like the ones in the form. And then you'll know that you're okay. If you get something that's 1 or 2 sentences long, if you get something that doesn't even include, teachers or independent contractors, then you need to go to the studio and say, look, this release doesn't protect anybody from anything. Use this model form of release. And the studios will go, okay, fine, I'm happy to do that. Because it doesn't hurt them. What's going on is they just don't know. They got the form off the internet, or some other studio sent it to them, or their third cousin was a lawyer and this guy sent them some release, and who knows. So the studios don't understand what these documents do either. So you actually have to protect yourself on this one. But the good news is you've got these model forms, and you've got something to look at, and if it kind of looks like the model form, and if you're included as a teacher, then you're on pretty safe ground.
How does it work retroactively? Like a studio will have students signed that form a year ago.
Yeah.
And I come in today and start teaching and I bring it up.
Yeah. I get. Yeah.
And they revise their form, but
Yeah.
does that apply to the people who signed the form a year ago?
No, it doesn't. And sometimes it depends on the studio. We'll say just have all the students re-sign the forms. So when all the students come in, just have them re-sign, the new form. We usually just do that. Just kind of phase it in over time. Because there's so much turnover in students anyways, studios, it's not that big of a deal. So.
And then if a student did want to sue, they would have to search out that form, or if they did sue, then the studio has to search out that form for their protection, or.
Well, the studio needs to keep all the forms.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when I worked in a studio, they had, folders of forms.
Yeah, I know.
There was no organization.
I know.
It, so.
Well, and you just hope that there never is any kind of a legal problem, so that you just have to go back in and go through all the folders and try to find one form. Can be tough. Okay, so everyone's clear on the waivers?
Well, I would actually, I'm curious because I do a lot of private yoga.
Yeah.
I haven't had anyone sign anything.
That's probably not very wise.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
On the back of here, there's one for teachers, and there's one for student directors.
so
There
would you
is.
just recommend I mean, it's easy to do at like the first meeting, but like most of my clients are like regular, so I just have to be like, I mean, whatever, they'll probably be fine signing it at this point, but.
Yeah. Well, I think it's actually wise to have a very simple agreement with private clients anyways.
Mhm.
And because there's sort of some rules you need them to follow. It's usually around how much it costs,
Mhm.
cancellations,
Mhm.
what if they're late, that kind of stuff. So that's just
Right.
good to have that in writing,
Yeah.
with the client. And then in that document itself, you can include the release.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So that's what I really recommend. And if you send me an email to GaryKissia@gmail, and I'll send you a form for that you can use
Great, thank
Do
you.
you
for
think-
privates.
Do you think that it's wise to have like that document incorporated into like a sign-in sheet, so when they're signing in, they're basically signing that document again every time they're signing in?
That's a good idea.
I don't see how they're doing that though.
'Cause
I mean, is it-
like here, when they come to class here, you have to sign in, and then the teacher will announce, if you didn't sign in, please go.
Yeah. So I worry about that because the student doesn't even see
Right.
the document. They're just
Fine
signing their
print,
name
very
on
fine print.
a line.
And
Yeah.
they're also in a rush coming into class. And
Yeah.
sometimes like they don't even, not all studios have people sign.
Some have
Is it
an
really
electronic
teamwork?
card.
It's going through a scanner. So I don't know why she's having people sign out.
I know, but I was just wondering what you thought about
Yeah.
that.
No, I think it's a bad practice. It's way better for a studio to have some process when they bring in a new student. Sort of talk about sort of the basic the way the studio runs and sort of the ground rules, and then have them sign the formal waiver then. That's way better than just trying to stick it into their sign-on sheet, because it'd be really easy to say they never read it, they never saw it, it was not enforceable for all those kinds of reasons. Okay, so everybody got waivers? Okay. And these these waivers can actually really be important, because it could be the difference between a settlement and a lawsuit. If you've got a really strong waiver protecting you and you do get sued, you're in a much better position to negotiate a settlement versus having nothing. Then they're just more inclined to go to the courthouse and just sue you for everything.
So then, is
it's
this a
next.
role that Yoga Alliance might take up? Is that they would have all these forms online and?
That's what this is. So they've sponsored this book. I mean, this costs $3.99 to get these two forms. Because if you went to a lawyer and said, "Write me, waiver against liability," it'd be over $1,000. So you're getting both of these for $3.99 plus all kinds of other stuff. So that's what they're doing, for the teachers. And I think this is worth $3.99.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Second limb of the three limbs is your insurance. True or false? I have insurance, so I'm protected from liability.
Depends on how much
Well,
you buy.
clearly it's false.
Clearly, I think you're just gaming me. You think everything I say is just a trick question. Clearly it's false. Why is it false?
Well, clearly it's false because when it's blanket, there's really no such thing as blanket insurance in terms of insurance companies don't even want to pay up. I mean, you have insurance with a company, and when it comes time for them to pay someone, they don't want it. They're actually not too happy about it. But I'm saying it because isn't anything that's construed as being in the favor of the larger entity or the bigger entity or the stronger entity, then any doubt goes to the poor schnook on the street who's suing you because you're the poor schnook. So we're going to be on your side. The court's going to be on your side. You're
Okay.
the helpless, defenseless one.
Another way to say that is that insurance policy is actually a contract between you and the insurance company. And guess who wrote it? The insurance company's lawyers. Do you
That's why I said
think
they don't want to pay?
do you think there's anything in that contract that's good for you?
No.
Absolutely not. But any other theories around this? Does everybody think that you're not protected if you have insurance? Or are you?
Well, hopefully you're somewhat protected.
So absolutely not protected, somewhat protected.
I think it all depends on how much you pay for your insurance policy. How much
Okay.
your liability.
Let's say you have $1 billion insurance policy. Are you protected?
You might be
Depends on what
protected up
happens
to
to
$1
you.
billion.
Okay.
If they come after your house and your business and
Okay.
you're not protected, right? Or depends on how much you're worth. Right?
How much is your
Okay.
house worth?
She's living in a fine house. Other theories. What's your
I
theory?
think it's been, well, it goes on to whether,
Oh,
what
I
kind
think
of
it's
entity
yeah.
you are. Whether you're a sole proprietor or LLC or whatever those other ones are that you mentioned in your
LLC.
document.
Limited
Okay.
Oh,
liability.
yeah, if you're an employee versus you're incorporated or DBA.
Go hold the thoughts around entities. We'll get that.
Well,
We'll get that
okay,
to that in a
so,
minute.
I have an insurance policy, I have an homeowner's insurance policy that I wrote with I bought higher liability because I had a dog that I was
Yeah.
anxious someone would accuse the dog of harm.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I don't know.
Okay.
Luckily, she didn't do that before she
Right.
died, so there.
Okay. So here's the secret to it. Every insurance policy has exclusions from coverage, right? Certain things aren't covered. They all have this. So when I give workshops, I ask all of the teachers to go back and read their insurance policy, which is just an absolutely horrible, miserable, awful thing to do.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to, I understand. Nobody wants to do this. And I always get 2 or 3 mails. Oh my God, I read my policy and I'm not covered by my policy because the stuff I do is excluded from coverage. So what I'm saying is, when you go out there and start teaching and get your insurance policy, read the thing and make sure what you do is covered. And you're probably sitting there thinking, well, I'm just going to teach vinyasa. I'm covered. Yeah, you are. But what if you change and a couple years down the line you say, oh, you know what? I discovered acro yoga. It's the coolest thing in the world. And you become an acro yoga teacher. I discovered flight yoga. Coolest thing in the world. You start teaching that. I discovered Ayurvedic medicine. So you start prescribing Ayurvedic remedies. So you've changed your practice, and those things are typically not covered.
How convenient for them, the insurance company.
Yeah, in this case, I wouldn't really necessarily attack them over that, because I think it's probably fair for them to say, if you're just kind of teaching vinyasa, here's your policy, here's what it costs. But if you're going to get into acro yoga or flight yoga, that's a whole lot more dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore, you should pay more for extra coverage. So I'm actually kind of okay with that. I'm okay with that. But from your point of view, whatever you're doing, you got to go into that policy and make certain that you're covered or not excluded. Is another way of saying it. And it's so easy to forget about that because you might change what you're doing in the future.
So they specifically write in the coverage exactly what they're going to cover?
Yeah, well, usually what
Say
they...
yoga studio, they say exactly what kind of...
Usually what it says is you're covered if you teach yoga. Then it goes out and says the following things are excluded from coverage of this policy. There's like a list of stuff, So that's the way they're typically done. But obviously it varies from policy to policy. So,
What is the fee schedule? Is it like a bad driver? If you have a charge against you, your fees,
I'm not so sure that would
Or is it
necessarily
householder?
happen. It may not really make that much difference, actually, depending upon the situation and the number of problems that you have.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yes.
So, this is something I should probably just go home and read my insurance policy, but I have,
I'm so sorry, but you really should.
because I do body work as well, so I have insurance for both.
Excellent. Because see, body work
which I think
typically is
would
not
cover
covered.
more
Yeah.
than just yoga insurance because it covers touch.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'm insured for up to teach a class of up to 100 people or 99 people.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah.
So, do you know anything about that it would cover more with like hands-on stuff, or are they two separate?
What I know is that the standard yoga insurance policies don't typically cover yoga therapy or massage or body work. Hands-on
adjustments?
body work.
Okay.
So, therefore, it's good that you have a separate policy for that, or you could go back to your original insurance policy and get an endorsement to the policy and pay them more money and get that covered. But the important thing is to just be absolutely positively certain that whatever you are doing is covered by your policy. And if you're not certain, then you call them up and ask them.
Right.
So you're very, very clear about it, because it's just too important. It's really, really important.
Yeah.
And what I would say There's basically two companies that do most insurance out there. One is Philadelphia, and they seem to be in some way sponsored by Yoga Journal. So you can get on the Yoga Journal website and you'll go and find the insurance, and you'll find stuff about Philadelphia. Okay. The other is Hayes, and Yoga Alliance negotiated a deal with Hayes where Hayes gives preferential premiums to members of Yoga Alliance. So what you should do, assuming you're going to be a member of Yoga Alliance, but just compare the two, and just figure out which one gives you the most amount of coverage and which one is the cheapest, and then just go with that, But at least you've got a choice, and you can compare, these companies and see which one is the better deal. Okay?
If you are doing teaching yoga to a group, no fee, or you're doing it, you're volunteering and stuff, does it make a difference if you are receiving remuneration for it, or does it make a difference?
No difference. If I'm in your class and I'm hurt, I feel that if I feel like you were negligently teaching me, I'm going to sue you, and I don't really care.
Right. And the court doesn't care either.
Doesn't care what?
That you're not charging for it if you're doing an informal gathering.
Yeah, I think a court would view that as immaterial.
Okay.
Yeah. And maybe we should talk about yoga in the park, because I get a lot of questions about yoga in the park. How do we deal with this where you're not in a contained space? You're just out there, and maybe you've got the core group that you start with, maybe you don't. But people are sort of wandering in, they're kind of wandering out, and sort of, how do you deal with that situation? And I have a couple of ideas around that. The first, it would be really nice if you could get at least the core group or the people you start with to sign a release. That would be really, really nice. I know it's really hard in a lot of these contexts for that to happen, but if you can do it, do it. And then if people start wandering in the middle of your class, they're just going to wander in. Don't stop the class and go, here, sign this release before you can. No downward dogs until we sign the release. It just doesn't work. So sign up who you can at the beginning, and then kind of let that go. My second suggestion is just be really gentle and really safe. Don't do any of the poses that tend to create more injuries. No handstands, no shoulder stands, no Hanuman. These kinds of things. Just don't do that in the park setting, and just keep it more towards the gentle and safer poses. Because this is really, a situation, where, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? If nobody gets injured in that class in the first place, you're not going to have a problem. So just keep it really easy and really gentle. So those are my suggestions.
Someone else in charge of,
yeah, it's nice to have an assistant.
In charge of, greeting people that are late or whatever.
Yeah, that's nice. But I wouldn't go so far as to disrupt the vibe or the flow to get people to sign waivers. But if it's kind of easy to do at the beginning, sure, sign up who you can, and then just kind of,
In the movie world, and I'm not sure how they post it. Maybe they post a sign, but if you enter a certain area, then you've signed a release to be in the movie.
Yeah, but that's actually different. That's actually released to use your image in the movie, which is a very different thing than giving up your legal right to sue if you've been harmed by the negligent conduct of another person. So that's a much more important right that you're giving up than just having your beautiful face in a movie. So the court would tend to require more formality around that. So I really think that would not be
Wouldn't work.
Enforceable. Yeah. Yes.
Is there any difference if you're teaching children, minors, or adults? In that case, I guess the parents would sign the release, but
right. Yeah.
Are there differences other than that?
No, like my
Category?
My forms have parents, a place where a parent can sign as a guardian of a child. So from a legal point of view, the parent would sign on behalf of the child. But otherwise, I don't see any difference other than that.
They're not a protected class, children?
Not from this point of view.
Okay.
They are for other reasons, but not
Yeah.
not for this.
Okay.
And actually, ironically, I wonder if it's actually harder to injure a child because they're so flexible. They don't have so far to fall and all of that, you know. Yes.
Thanks for bringing up that point. I actually teach my students every Monday morning yoga. I have no, they never signed a waiver. It's just part of my curriculum.
And where does this occur?
In a private school.
In a
I
private.
teach 5th grade.
Yeah.
Part of the curriculum I do with them is Monday morning, a 45-minute block of yoga
Okay.
start
Okay.
our week.
Yeah.
The good news is I'm finished for the year because we get out this week and I have
You're not gonna lose any
tomorrow
sleep.
morning to
Yeah.
do. So the good news
Start
is
tomorrow.
I'm safe for this year, but
Yeah.
looking ahead to next year.
Yeah.
Slap them with a waiver.
I mean, my school certainly has a big insurance policy, but you know.
Yeah. So that's actually the question. You should ask whoever runs that school. You know, does your insurance policy cover me if someone is injured in this class, and I get sued?
Right, because otherwise every teacher would really have to have their own insurance policy
Right.
for everything because, you know, a kid could trip over
Sure.
another kid and
Sure.
crack their head or
Absolutely.
back in the chair, no matter how many times he doesn't not do, and you know,
Yeah.
they split their heads open.
Sure. So I have to believe that the school's got some huge insurance policy that covers all of the. You're an employee, right?
Yes.
Covers all the employees. So I have to believe that's the case. I mean, and in that situation, I mean, I wouldn't imagine that you would need to go farther and think about releases or anything. Just as long as, you know. Yeah.
A further extension of that is, we have homeowner policies. Everybody that owns a home
Mm-hmm.
has a homeowner policy.
Yeah.
And what if somebody is injured in your home, a private client? Is that covered? I mean, generally?
Yeah. I actually worry about people that teach yoga classes in the home because I worry about slip and fall.
That's covered.
Well, I don't know.
And if you're doing business.
I worry about the banana peel, right? And I worry about stairs, and I worry about, a home oftentimes would not be nearly as safe as someplace, like this. So I could see that the risk of someone getting injured in the home could be greater than someone getting injured here. So the question for you is, does your homeowner's insurance policy cover harm that comes out of you running this yoga business out of your home?
You would need a business insurance probably
Could-
that has
could-
your own address on it, I would imagine, right?
Very possible. But I would read that policy and be very certain that you are covered. And if it's unclear or if it's silent, then I would call that insurance company and talk to them and see if you are covered. And if you're not, then you get to pay them more money for an endorsement to cover that activity. But I wouldn't just automatically think that just because you have homeowners insurance that it covers that kind of a risk.
I
I
have
would-
a friend who does daycare service at their house, and they don't have that kind of home insurance. They have regular home insurance
Yeah.
coverage, but they don't have something to protect them doing the business. So what they do is they ask the parents to sign the waiver
Yeah.
or like a release or like just make sure that they know that it's
Right.
not forever. Like the kids get injured,
Right.
it's not covered.
Yeah.
So they have to agree that. So if you have maybe another option means to do something like that.
Yeah, I just feel that it's better to have both. In most cases, the waiver plus the insurance, for sure. And you know, the yoga teacher's insurance isn't all that much. I mean, do you know what it is? It's like $100 a year or something, or?
I think for yoga it's 100, mine's like 159 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's not a huge deal.
Oh, no, it's, you
To-
should definitely get it.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
worth having.
Yeah.
Because it's only once a year.
Yeah. Do you have a question, or?
Your question? Did you get your question answered?
Yeah,
Okay.
sort of, kind of.
So mine is kind of back along the same lines, but and I would probably do things differently now that I like after the fact. But sometimes when things happen in the moment, it's hard to know how to just be a human being and help a human being, or like what you're covered. But like for example, at Planet Granite, someone got. She was dizzy. I didn't actually see it happen, but I think she was coming up from a forward fold. She got dizzy. She fell backwards into like a concrete post,
Yee.
like cracked her
Wow.
head, like we all heard it crack, and then she fell to the floor and was kind of like convulsing, and it was like really scary.
Yikes.
And so I immediately went over and like tried to tried to find out whether she was okay, and she was saying she was okay. And anyways, like I was gonna call the ambulance, but she didn't want me to, and I think I realized that like she just was nervous and didn't want all the attention on her, and B, she wasn't sure how much that was gonna cost. But like I didn't quite know what to do
Right.
in that situation. And
Right.
anyways, so, but I'm not even really asking about, that makes me realize I should know what the waiver says at Planet Granite, first of all. B, after the class, I drove her to her doctor because she didn't want the ambulance to come.
Yeah.
And then when I went home, my boyfriend said, you shouldn't have driven her to the doctor, because then like what if something happened to her while you were in the car with her?
Yeah.
Like so, and then another time, this is kind of similar with a private client, when I had a studio that I rented full time. So like she came to my place and she had vertigo, and she was so dizzy that she couldn't do anything or move, and she couldn't drive, so I drove her to the hospital. So like both of those times, I was driving people when there was something like going on with them that, I mean.
Yeah, well, there's something called a Good Samaritan statute. And basically, a Good Samaritan is someone who sees another person who is in trouble, and you try to help them. And if you try to help them, but things don't go well, you shouldn't have liability for trying to do the right thing and trying to help someone, as long as you act sort of reasonable in what you're doing.
Right.
Otherwise, nobody would help anybody, and if somebody got in trouble, you just go, I'm not going to even touch you because I could get sued, and they would just, die or something. So in those kind of cases, you acted reasonably. You'd be within the coverage of something like a Good Samaritan statute. So I would not, lose sleep over that, at all.
You know, like when you take CPR, they tell you that.
Sure,
So because
yeah.
if you decide to try to revive someone and they die, you can't be held responsible because you know being a good Samaritan.
I know.
Right.
So
Right.
Do you think yoga teachers should be CPR certified?
Absolutely, yeah. And I know a lot of
Anyone
studios
dealing with
require
should
it,
be
yeah.
CPR
Yeah.
Are there
certified.
defibrillators here in the studio?
I'm certified.
I'm certified too,
certified.
but are there defibrillators
No.
in the studio?
They're at the mall.
I think a lot of hot studios are going to having, I think most of them are having, the practice of having those in the studios
People are passing out.
for heart attacks. Yeah.
But sometimes, in Alyssa's case, sometimes isn't that someone could interpret that the best thing for her to have done was to call the ambulance.
That's right, but she's not a doctor, and
Right.
she's a person that's
Right,
trying to
right,
help,
right.
and as long as it was reasonable
In this
for
case,
her
it was
to drive the person to, the doctor.
Well, that was after, that was like after.
You were a citizen at that point.
That
You were
was
no longer a
after
teacher.
the class
You-
and after like things had settled down and she
Yeah.
seemed okay. Like, if I had to do over again, I would have just called the ambulance no matter
Right.
what, because I found out, I asked Planet Granite after, and they said, you should have come to the front, had someone come, I wouldn't have gone to the front, but I should have had someone else go to the front desk. The front desk staff would have called, and if they came and she didn't need it, then it wouldn't have cost anything. That's what they told me.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true for all things, but in this case, they said that was the case.
I'm surprised that like the manager of Planet Granite, who's there in charge at that time, didn't come over and take care of the situation rather than you.
They didn't know.
That seems
She
really.
didn't tell them.
Yeah, they did.
Well, in the middle of class,
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to think what happened. I think I like told someone who was, I think I actually did tell one of the students that I knew really well to
To go get the manager.
tell the front
Because
desk.
they should have taken over that situation rather than you.
Right, because
And
it was like really intense. I'm trying to manage everyone in the class.
Yeah.
And then this girl and
Yeah.
try to keep her calm and know like
Right.
whether it's better to just like be with her
Yeah.
or like get more help. Yeah, so now I know obviously like what should be done,
Sure.
but it's hard in the moment sometimes to know
Very scary.
what the best thing to do is.
So let's talk about the third limb, and this is sort of some best practices.
Gonna turn the lights on?
Sure.
Lights?
Yeah. These are best
We got-
practices, and these light. Wow. We can like.
Normally you don't.
I couldn't see very well.
So these best practices came out of a lot of discussions with Yoga Alliance and some of the insurance companies, lawyers, and all kinds of people. And this is sort of where we came up with. So the first, let's talk about touch. And this is almost certainly going to get baked into the code of conduct. It's sort of a best practice around touch. Yoga Alliance hasn't, approved this. It's not out there, but I can tell you this is where it's headed. And I think this is the right place for it to be, personally. So the best practice around touch, I think, will be that teachers have to get the consent of the student before they touch the student. You're probably thinking, I've got to ask all 30 students every time I touch one, it'd drive me crazy. No. You can get that consent by making a general announcement at the beginning of the class. If there is anyone in this class who does not want to be touched, let me know in some way. And that way, I think everyone will be much better off for all kinds of reasons. Okay? And some studios are going to little do not touch cards or some sort of a chip. Other teachers will put students in child or, and everybody's in child and you don't want to be touched, raise your hand or something, so it's a little more private. Because some students don't want to publicly say, I don't want to be touched, So there's different techniques around, doing that.
Red stickers if you do.
Yeah, really?
Haven't decided.
I actually pretend to be much worse than I really am, so I get touched more, but that's a different thing. So the other big best practice is how do you deal with students that have pre-existing injuries? And this is a big deal. And so here's the threshold question. And this kind of came out of my personal experience, is I've been in an endless number of classes where at the beginning of the class the teacher will say, does anybody have any injuries? And somebody will raise their hand. Several people raise their hand, they'll talk about their injuries or whatever. And then the teacher launches off into the class, but does absolutely nothing different to care for the students with the injuries. The teacher seems to more or less promptly forget that there are injured students and just teaches the class. So that caused me to think, is a teacher better off legally by not asking at all as compared to asking and not doing anything to take care of those students that have injuries?
You said don't ask.
Yes, the best, thank you. The best practice is really, in most cases, don't ask. Because I think what's going on from the teacher's point of view, let's say that you ask and you get 2 or 3 students that have injuries. Well, you've got 2 or 3 different, kinds of injuries. Let's say you've got 20 people in that class. You're trying to run the class, trying to remember which student has what injury. Hopefully have enough expertise to deal with those injuries, not aggravate those students, and give them special care, special attention so they don't hurt themselves in the context of running this whole class. And most teachers just can't handle all of that. So the better practice is not to ask about injuries in the first place, because here's what we want to do legally. Legally, we want to put the burden of care on the student's shoulders and not on the teacher's shoulders, right? We want to make the students responsible for their own, physical care within the class.
So you can make a general announcement if you have injuries, if you have something that you're working with, please be mindful of like how you approach,
Yes.
call me over if you need my help.
Yes.
Something like that.
That's the best practice. So at the beginning of the class, you say something like that. If you have any kind of an injury or any kind of physical condition, be very careful, be very mindful that you don't do anything to aggravate that condition in this class. So yeah, you make a statement along those lines, but that's also coupled with something else, which is to clearly offer modifications to the students in the class. Now, I've been in a million classes where the teacher would go, well, if you can't do scorpion, modify. Well, I don't know what to do, But you hear that a lot. So the good teachers, in general, and certainly the best practice for this purpose, is to offer different levels of modification. Mm-hmm. If you're a level 1 student, you do this. If you're a level 2 student, do that. If you're a level 3 student, do this. That way, the student has really clear instruction about what to do based upon where they are. And the students will appreciate that. I love it when I get that in a class, rather than just having someone tell me to modify and I don't even know what to do. And certainly, from the standpoint of managing students who may have some injury, they're way better off too, because they can pick the modification that you've given them.
Can there be some reference to that issue in the original waiver that they sent? That they are responsible?
Yeah, and that stuff's all in the waiver, but this is around fundamentally trying to prevent the harm from happening in the first place.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing, and that's one strand. The other strand is you don't want to be responsible for those injured students. So if you ask those students, tell me if you're injured, and these 3 students here tell you they're injured, guess what? You have a higher legal duty to care for them than if you don't know at all.
So ignorance can be a defense in this case.
In this case. Because if you have that knowledge, then you've got that duty. You just can't ignore these injured students over here.
So, but that seems also like a studio policy sometimes, that, like, I'm pretty sure Tara told me at yoga retreat that you need to ask at the beginning of class about injuries.
Yeah, and that is definitely old school thinking. And we're definitely working on, changing that. And I'll actually talk to Darren about that, because I didn't know that they were still doing that. But it's just...
Well, I don't know if that's in the teacher training, I just
Yeah.
know that as a teacher there.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Is that Yoga Tea's policy, or is that just what you like to do?
No, that's what I'm saying, I think it's yoga tree policy, I have to
Yeah.
actually read the policies, but
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she mentioned that, or maybe I read it in the policies.
Right.
And I often try to do that, but I know sometimes it is hard if a lot of students have injuries to keep track.
Sure.
But often if I have enough time, when I ask, I'll say a few things before, like right away when they tell me, I'll say,
Mhm.
okay, so these are the things you're gonna wanna pay attention to,
Right.
and then tell me if we're in the middle of something.
Right.
But you don't always have time to do that.
It-
But then that way, if I forget, I've already told them,
Yeah.
like, for knees, like, what they can do, or.
But the other problem you have is, so, it's time for a handstand. You see these
Mhm.
students, launching in the handstand. It's the worst possible thing they should be doing. So are you like on top of your game to go
Mhm.
over there and say, oh, handstand's a really bad idea. You should do legs up against the wall or something.
Mhm.
I mean, you just can't say a few words at the beginning
Yeah.
and then just let them go.
Yeah.
You've got to keep an eye on them throughout the entire class.
Right, wow.
And then you've got to have a certain level of expertise to know what to recommend for God knows how many different kinds of injuries that you're going to hear about, in that class. So that's
So
the,
potentially, it would be like, if you wanna just offer care as a teacher, maybe it's like at the end of class, I often say, please feel free to talk with me,
sure.
if you have
Sure.
something specific that you're working on, because then you can actually spend some.
Absolutely,
time with the
yeah.
person.
You're out of the class environment.
Right.
And it's one-on-one, and you can take the time to find out exactly what's going on, and
Right.
and then you can have some time to realize, do I know about this or not? And you can decide if you can give some guidance to the person,
Right.
or not. So that's a very different situation. Yes?
She, in this case, or an example of this case, if the teacher is an independent contractor, can the studio say to the teacher, you are required to make this statement about injuries before the class? You said something about that in your document.
Yeah, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay,
And
we can hold that for the
Yeah.
thought, but I've been thinking about it.
yeah, that's
I
a
think
very
now
good
I'm an
observation.
employee.
Yeah.
Now I'm an employee of Yoga Tree.
Yeah. I think Yoga Tree went to the employer-employee model a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Planet Granite, I'm an independent contractor.
Okay.
And being an independent contractor, they probably shouldn't require their independent contractors to comply with those kinds of policies, because it's probably too much control.
Mhm.
But we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
The other question is, let's say that you decide to follow this best practice, and somebody walks into your class and they have an open and obvious injury. Their arms in a sling or something, or maybe you have someone who's pregnant or something. But if it's an open and obvious condition, where does that put you? Or, class is about to start, I walk up and say, teacher, I want to tell you that I tore up my shoulder, or my bike crashed, I don't really know what to do. Do you just go, nah? So you don't even listen to them at all? So what do you do if you get knowledge that a student has an injury because it's either open and obvious, or they just walk up and tell you that they have an injury? What do you do? Where does that leave you? What do you think?
It's your responsibility to take care of that.
Correct. You're stuck. You have the knowledge, so therefore you have the duty to give that student some special care. Whether you want it or not, you have got it.
Can you say to them, I don't recommend that you practice today?
You can and you should, and I actually recommend this more and more forcefully as I see stuff that's going on, and actually some studios are doing this more and more and more, which is, and Darren has told me he's done this, is that there could be lots of situations where that student is just in the wrong class, and then there's a lot of different ways that teacher could gently suggest, recommend, require, demand, something that student take, a different class. And I think that is certainly the best practice, because fundamentally what we want to do is keep students from getting injured. If the student doesn't get injured, we don't have any legal problems. And if they're just flat in the wrong class, then by all means suggest that they take a different class. By all means. And you see this a lot of students that are in level 3 or advanced class that have no business whatsoever being in there. They're just made a gigantic mistake, or they think that they're tough guys. I did that a few times and realized, but you see that all the time, So I'd say be very proactive with recommending that students take the proper class. And you can be very, you can do this in a very positive, compassionate way, for sure. I'm not suggesting be ugly at all. Because a lot of times they just don't know. They just don't know. They don't understand what the class is about, and may not understand how that relates to what their situation is, and they may really appreciate that guidance from you. Yeah.
And if they don't follow the advice, then
yeah,
it should
and
be.
I've heard of situations where studios have been really aggressive about just saying you can't come to this class. They felt the risk was too great. But again, if they sort of insist, if they've got an open and obvious condition, then you're kind of stuck with that higher duty to take care of them. Unfortunately.
Yeah, like, what do
You can
this is
insist that
kind
they
of-
observe.
You might could do that. I mean, I've been in classes where, and maybe you guys have seen this. The teachers where, you've got a teacher leading a class, and there'll be a person off to the side doing their own thing. Like,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
and I practiced in Santa Cruz for like a year, and I always went to like this Monday at noon class, and this woman was always up here. We called her Moonbeam, because she was just like doing her completely disconnected from everything. So finally the studio said, hey, either join the class or go outside or something, but you just can't have someone doing their own stuff on the side. And
Well, it's worse if they're like in the front of the class. I
Yeah.
had someone after class once. I didn't want her to feel unwelcome in the class. And she actually kind of apologized before I said anything. And I said, that's okay, I understand if you need to do some different modifications sometimes. But if you're really gonna do your own thing, please at least go like to the side or to the back, because people are watching you and being really distracted. by
Oh,
it.
yeah, yeah.
Because a lot of people, like, they follow by just watching people.
They watch other
Yeah.
people, not the
And then
teacher,
you're
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, like, they have no idea what's going on.
Right, yeah.
I was in a recording class together last week, actually, and this woman behind me was, I'm not kidding you, she had on 2 sweatshirts.
Oh,
and
wow.
2 pairs of sweatpants. And she did it was like over 100 degrees. I know, I'm thinking to myself, you are crazy. But like, yeah, that's another situation where.
The teacher should step in and say, hey, this isn't safe. You really need to take off some clothes here. I mean,
That
That doesn't sound very good.
Take off your clothes.
Take off your clothes.
And some layers.
Take off some layers would be a better
right,
way.
exactly. You don't want to spend that much time.
Yeah. Now, this is a different situation than, say, yoga therapists. Okay? They have a duty to ask, because that's what they do. So we can contrast this with sort of that situation. Okay? Just so we're clear. All right. So any questions around all of that?
Yeah, so you're saying yoga therapist versus a yoga teacher?
Yeah. See, yoga therapy is one-on-one. And that person's typically there because they have a certain kind of a problem. So, of course, the teacher has to have a deep discussion with that person to understand what the issue is so that they can apply the proper therapeutic protocol to them. Just want to distinguish that situation from sort of the general class.
Right.
So we're clear. Okay. All right. Let's talk about legal entities because they keep popping up. True or false? I am a sole proprietor, so I am protected from liability.
False.
False? How come?
Because you have to protect the corporation, right?
What corporation?
I don't know, you set up a corporation.
Okay.
I don't know.
You want to protect your own assets. with the corporate, you want to separate your personal assets from your business assets.
Well, I mean,
Right.
it's not even necessarily different. You can be a sole proprietor without having any relation to a corporation or a business other than your own sole proprietorship. Like, I am a sole proprietor, and that's my business.
So
I
does
also
that
have a
protect
general
you?
Partnership, but like,
Protect you against what?
Liability.
I mean, my insurance is there to hopefully protect me as much as my insurance protects me. But I'm not sure if I understand the question totally. I don't think it protects me any more than what my insurance protects me.
Okay.
That covers me as a sole proprietor business.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody think a sole proprietor protects you from anything or not? No?
I think they can always interweave it, no matter what.
We have the
Sole
interweaving,
proprietor just is-
interweaving
If
on
they're gonna
it.
go after your business and they don't get enough, they can take go after you personally.
But a sole proprietor is you, right?
Yeah.
It's just
So
you.
that's who they come after, right?
Okay. Yeah, so
You can even use your social security number instead of your EIN number as a sole
Yeah.
proprietor, right?
Okay, so you've pretty much got it right. So here's the way it works. So there are legal entities that are created that do business. And those are corporations, limited liability companies, and different kinds of partnerships. And the theory being that if that legal entity does something, it's liable and not the owners of the entity. A sole proprietorship is not a legal entity at all. It's just you. And so, as a sole proprietor, what you're doing is every contract that you're signing individually as a person. And what you're doing is you're putting your assets, you're putting your stuff on the line as a sole proprietor. Whereas if you have an LLC, a corporation, or a partnership of some sort, those are the entities that do the signing. Those are the entities that are actually doing the business. And if something goes terribly wrong, then they are the ones. The entity is liable and not you personally. The reason that you care about that is only the assets of the entity are exposed and not your personal assets. As a sole proprietor, the whole enchilada is exposed. So that's how it works.
And the entity is what gets the insurance, not the proprietor.
No, as a sole proprietor, you will be getting the insurance in your name.
Not in the name of the entity?
If you have an entity, you would get it in the name of the entity. If you
Right.
don't, you would get it in the name of you
Right.
as a sole proprietor.
So does anybody have an entity?
I have a general partnership,
I work with.
aside from,
You have a general partnership?
yeah.
Really?
It's for a clothing line, an online field clothing line.
You should be on there.
We should talk.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you.
We should talk.
in general about that.
Any other entities? Okay. So setting the general partnership aside. So everybody here is a sole proprietor. So you don't have an entity. It's just you. So the insurance just protects you as a person. And whenever you sign a contract or agreement of any sort, you're signing as a person, as you. Now you can give yourself a name,
DBA.
DBA, sure. give yourself a name.
No, but I mean, that's what you mean,
Yeah.
doing business like
Yeah.
this, that's the same.
So you don't have to do business in your personal name. You can come up with some name like, Bindi Yogini or something, and that's your business name. But still, it's a sole proprietor, and your assets are liable if something, goes wrong. So the question, that I get, of course, is should I, as a yoga teacher, form a corporation or an LLC to protect myself? I get that a lot, which is a logical question. And the answer actually is no. I don't think it's necessary for most yoga teachers. If you have a valid and enforceable waiver in place that actually covers you, and if you have insurance that actually covers you, And if you sort of follow these best practices, I think you're going to be fine. I think it's all you need. Because the truth of the matter is, injuries in yoga classes are fairly rare. The ones that bubble up to some sort of acclaim, are even rarer. And then from those, the situation where an insurance policy wouldn't actually come in and cover that would be even more rare. So I don't see the need to go through the expense and the hassle to create an entity. Now, if you sort of get to the point, if you're somebody like, I don't know, Shiva Ray, who's running sort of like, a whole bunch of global businesses. I mean, she does all kinds of things. At some point, you've got to form an entity. You just can't be signing your name to all these contracts and taking on all this contractual liability and functioning at that level. So at some point, if your business just grows and grows and grows, you want to form an entity. There's a whole bunch of other reasons. But if you're just functioning as a yoga teacher, don't see the need to go through the expense and the hassle to put one together. I've had some yoga teachers that say, "Look, I can't sleep. I want an entity." Fine, you can have an entity. It's not a huge thing, but like I say, as long as you've got the insurance and the waiver and best practices, I think you're fine. I don't recommend it.
But if you have multiple businesses and you're not at a Shiva Ray level, and can't project exactly what those businesses are,
At some
an
point-
LLC or one of these things would cover
Yeah,
everything.
yeah. At some point, yeah. You want
can
it.
form an LLC just as yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I have one. Because what I do is I use it for book publishing. I use it for law stuff. I use it for teaching, and so I run a bunch of stuff, like that, through it.
And how much does that cost to form an LLC?
There's attorney fees.
Yeah, not really much. I mean, I usually do them for a couple $100 or something, or you can go to Rocket Lawyer or no, it's LegalZoom or Rocket Lawyer, one of those kind of places, and do it. It's not a huge thing. The problem in California for an LLC is $800 a year minimum tax, which is unpleasant.
Is it worth it?
I don't really think so for your average yoga teacher. But if you build up a lot of different businesses, at some point, it's good to have one. And if you want to bring on a partner, then you've got to have an entity for sure. Because what I see is a lot of times a couple of teachers will just sort of get together and decide we're going to do business together and start doing all this stuff. They don't have any kind of an entity formed, and it's just a mess. So if you're going to get a partner and do something, you've got to have an entity. So, okay? Everybody got it? Any questions? Okay. Do we want to take 10-minute break? It's kind of hot in here. And is this,
Well, it's 7:30 now.
you want me to just keep on going?
Oh, well, are we going till 8:30?
Yeah, what do you think?
I think 8:15.
If you wanted to take no break and go to 8, that would be good too.
That'd be great too, yeah.
What would you guys prefer? I mean, is everybody, you doing okay?
I prefer to end earlier than
me
take a
too.
break
Yeah.
now.
Okay,
Me too.
all right.
Are you tired?
No, I can go on for till midnight if you want.
Yeah, you're in your element.
Yes, I'm afraid so. Let's talk about the agreement that you would have with the yoga studio where you teach. And this actually gets into the whole independent contractor thing. So we'll talk about that too. Because they're kind of tied together. So here's the situation. You are either an employee or an independent contractor, one or the other. The IRS and many, many state taxing authorities and other governmental agencies have fundamentally concluded that the independent contractor relationship is abusive and it's bad for workers. Because lots of businesses, rather than hiring employees and giving them benefits and pay taxes on them, bring them in as independent contractors. They don't pay taxes, don't pay benefits, doesn't trigger all kinds of protections that employees have. So, there's been an enormous amount of audits of corporations by all these taxing authorities on this issue. They go in, look at the relationship between the workers and the company, and they say, these are actually employees. You've been calling them independent contractors. That breaks the law. You have to pay tons of taxes and penalties and interest and all kinds of stuff. Now what's happened, there's about 15 states, probably more now, that are actually targeting yoga studios. California is one of those states, as is New York. I know I can name about 4 studios right in the Bay Area that are being audited right now. And these are terrible situations because some studios get put out of business because they can't pay all of the taxes and penalties. Sometimes these are over $100,000. Or they can't handle the change to employer-employee. So it's really an ugly and distressing situation because if you're teaching at a studio and they get audited, they may go out of business, which destroys the community and you lose your job. If they flip to employer-employee, you may find yourself an employee. And what you probably want to be is an independent contractor. And where you're going to end up, you could be an employee here and an independent contractor over there. And you get to comply with 2 sets of tax laws. So this really does matter to you. The other reason it matters to you, this is really important. If you're teaching at a studio gets audited, guess what? Those auditors call up the yoga teachers. They call up the yoga teachers, so you're going to get drug into the audit. And they'll call you up and they'll say, do you think that you are an independent contractor or an employee? And a lot of yoga teachers don't know what they are. And they go, I'm an employee. Guess what? They just destroyed the legal case of the studio. If you go, I'm an independent contractor, they go, well, how come? How do you know? Teacher goes, well, it's because I am.
If it's independent contractor, do you have 1099 income? Is that
Correct.
how that works?
But 1099 has nothing to do with what you are.
Okay. I thought it was just-
If that's what you are, that's what you get, but it doesn't make you that.
Right. But is there a certain amount that you still can just do whatever you want under like the $600 law?
No, that's
Is that
irrelevant.
history?
That's irrelevant
That
too.
doesn't either. Okay.
So the law is really complicated, and so we don't really have time to get into that, and you would all fall asleep. But here's what it boils down to. It boils down to control. Okay? The more the studio controls what you do, the more you are like an employee. The less it controls what you do, the more you're like an independent contractor. Okay? Now, one of the things that you should do as teachers, and this is really important, is you have to help protect the yoga studios where you teach. And here's some of the danger signs. If the studio doesn't ask you to sign any contract at all with them, they are clueless. They are clueless. If they get audited, they will lose.
It could be an employee contract or a incorporated or.
Independent contractor, yeah.
Oh, if you're an independent contractor, you need to sign a contract with them.
An agreement.
Well,
Sounds like in either case.
either case you need to sign an agreement with them. But let's assume for the sake of the argument we're all independent contractors. That's kind of the default. And you go to a studio and you say, hey, I want to teach. And they go, cool. They decide to let you teach. And they don't give you an independent contractor agreement. they are clueless, and they will lose in an audit. So that is a huge danger sign. They'll probably give you something to sign. It'll probably be awful, but let's set that aside. Let's say they ask you to collect money at the front desk. Check-in students collect money. Huge danger sign, because that's what employees do, not independent contractors.
What about the volunteers or the trades?
Yeah.
That's how that works.
We'll get that to in a minute. What if they ask you to lock and unlock the studio, clean up the space, request that you play certain kinds of music or not other kinds of music, all these kinds of things. These are all signs of employer-employee and not an independent contractor relationship. Those are all danger signs. The big thing, though, is invoicing. And I'm doing all I can to change the business practice such that teachers have to give invoices to the studios. And you guys are going, Gary, I hate you because I don't want to give invoices. Here's why. Think about this. So let's say that your sink clogs up at your house. Let's just use the yoga studio, it's better. UN sink clogs up. She calls the plumber. The plumber comes, fixes the sink, and what does he do when he leaves? He gives her an invoice. Okay? The plumber is not in the yoga business. Yi Wen doesn't give the plumber his tools. Look at this. She's giving you guys the tools. She doesn't advertise the plumber. She doesn't collect money from the plumber's customers and pay the plumber some slice of it. In your case, you guys are in the same business. You're both in the yoga business. She's giving you the tools. She's giving you the space. She's advertising your service. She's collecting money from the students, and she's paying you. And you guys aren't employees, really? So this is why it's a gigantic problem.
But so is it more beneficial, you're saying, for us as teachers to be employees or independent contractors?
Well, that's a huge question. From the standpoint of the studio, it's much safer for them if you're an employee. And a lot of studios are going to this because they're terrified of an audit. So if you've got an employer-employee, you don't worry about these audits anymore, but they have to take out all of your taxes out of your paycheck, right? And that's, they don't really want to do that. And you as a teacher may not want all those taxes taken out of your paycheck, plus you lose all of your business expenses deductions which you love, right? But as an employee, you don't get to do that anymore, right? So it's kind of cuts both ways. But the irony is that the teachers and the studios both want an independent contractor relationship, but the law just doesn't really permit it.
Isn't there a legal time limit on being an independent contractor?
Is there a what?
Oh, yeah.
Time
Isn't it
limit?
1 year?
3 years or something like that?
A
What- what's
legal
the-
time limit on how
No,
long
that's
you can be a
temporary
contractor?
employees.
Yeah. No, you can be an independent contractor for forever.
But I heard that, cause I was at Stanford on a contract
Yeah,
for
but
a
that's
year.
that's temporary employees.
No, as a temporary employee contractor. I was working through an agency, so I was an agency's W-2 person.
That's Stanford's rules.
But they said only 1 year.
Well, that's probably because well, see, if you have this relationship that goes on for a long time, the longer this goes on, the more it looks
you're
like
an
employee,
employee.
right? So they're saying we're going to make it all short term, because just always think about the plumber,
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're working on is trying to get teachers to give invoices to studios. That's a huge, part of what this independent contractor relationship is. The other thing is, through Yoga Alliance, we've put model independent contractor agreements out there for studios to start using so they can build the strongest case for this independent contractor relationship, and to survive an audit. So, yes.
So if you're currently working at a studio and you're working on a sole proprietorship, and they want to change it to an employee, is your rate, there's a rate difference, right? Because as an employee,
You will get less money because they're going to take out all the taxes.
what's the percentage, do you know?
It's your tax percentage. It's not their tax percentage.
Depends on how much.
It's your
you
rate.
earn.
It's your tax rate they take out.
Yeah, it's your tax rate. Plus, they're going to take out, FICA and Social Security and
Right,
workers'
yeah.
compensation and
SDSU.
all this stuff, and it's a lot. And the yoga teachers hate it, but on the other hand, what's the studio supposed to do? They're worried about the audit. If they get audited and lose, then the state's going to force them to convert all the teachers to employees anyways.
Do you know
Plus,
what-
they pay taxes and.
Is the Yoga Alliance going in that direction as well, as to really,
Make
like,
them employees.
urge the studios to make them employees?
No. What we're doing is we're educating. We're saying if you want to have independent contractors, here's the law. Here's the law. Know the law, and here's a model agreement. Use something like that. What we have now is people don't know the law. They don't use good agreements.
Yeah.
There's just general perception that's been there forever, which is wrong, is that yoga teachers are automatically independent contractors. That's the default business model here. And so we've just been operating sort of out of ignorance all of these years. So we're about trying to educate people so that the studio can make an intentional decision. Do I want to have an independent contractor model or employer-employee? And do it the right way. So Yoga Alliance doesn't have a position either way. They just don't want yoga studios put out of business and teachers put out of work, because studios are getting audited and they lose because they don't know the law. So, okay. So let's talk about some of the things that should be in your agreement with the studio. Okay. So first, not surprising, what are you? Are you an employee or are you an independent contractor? Right? It should address that. And this is interesting. Are you required to do odd jobs around the studio? I get so many calls and complaints about this where teachers end up just doing all this stuff around the studio, and it drives them crazy because they have to do the floors and check in the students and unlock the place and go buy extra toilet paper and all this stuff, and they really are independent contractors, and the job tends to expand. So be really clear if the owner expects you to do this kind of stuff or not. But here's the thing. If you're an independent contractor and the studio owner wants you to do all this stuff, that studio owner actually is building a case to turn you into an employee. You shouldn't be doing all that stuff if you're an independent contractor. That's what employees do. So that's actually a red flag if they want you to do all that stuff. Okay?
A red flag though, in what way?
That you're actually an employee.
That they're gonna turn you into an employee, or, cause they don't wanna turn you into,
Right.
or that they're gonna get audited and then they're gonna be made to turn you.
Correct. It's a red flag that they don't know what they're doing.
Right, okay.
And that what you're doing are things that employees actually
Right.
do. And if they get audited, that they will probably lose because you're really not functioning like an independent
Okay.
contractor.
Makes sense.
Yes.
What's the difference between being asked to do something and being told to do something?
So being told is employer-employee.
Right.
You
but
got the
you're-
boss
but
that tells you you're the employee, do what we say.
Right,
You know.
we just gave the scenario of you're an independent contractor, but be wary if you're asked to do things like buy toilet paper or sweep the floor.
Those are jobs that
That's
employees
something
do.
Yes, there's a difference between saying, and part of your duties are, and saying, would you please, as the after class, run the vacuum over the floor and lock the door, and here's a key and lock the door. There's a difference between being asked
Right.
and being told.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or, yeah, like what if they don't have a receptionist here all day long? They have to open the door when
Right.
they come in.
Very dangerous for the studio owner to ask independent contractor to come in, open the studio, check students in, take money. That's what employees do. Very dangerous. Very dangerous. Another, and I'm actually working on an audit where the studio lost big time. Here's why. They had a teacher policy manual.
Hmm.
All teachers have to basically follow all the stuff in the manual. And it's kind of stuff like you'd expect, like, be on time, hold a sacred space, play the right kind of music, clean up, the studio afterward, this kind of stuff. But the state said this manual is a set of rules and regulations that these teachers have to follow. That's control. Their employees, you lose.
What if it was basically just stated differently? A teacher guideline or recommendation?
It's dangerous. I recommended that stuff not be in
Will
writing.
you just throw that stuff out?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really?
You go in and
You
and
do it orally.
watch their classes
Yeah.
and see them, and then you can decide to not keep them on as an independent contractor.
But then if they say it as against have it in writing, then they might say all the same things.
Yeah,
When
if
you-
it's in writing, it's a huge problem in an audit. Okay, here's one. I've got a lot of calls about this. Does the studio have to give you notice before they fire you?
Not if you're an independent
If
contractor.
the
It's at
contract
will.
says that will, no.
Well, this is something that actually could be in your agreement. They have to give you some sort of notice before they terminate the relationship. Wouldn't you want to know that?
No, this day and age,
Yeah.
I think everybody's at will now, aren't they?
Yeah, I thought so
I know,
too.
nobody says, I mean.
Employees, but not
Yeah.
in corporation.
We're actually confusing things. They can fire you at will for sure. Of course, a will is an employer-employee concept, right?
Right.
But still, they let's just hold that. So they can certainly fire you at will, but do they have to give you some kind of notice?
They don't.
No.
The law says no. If you sign at will when you are signing up as your independent contractor,
Right.
and it says, we can terminate at will anytime, and you don't have to give us notice.
It can say that, but even though it's at will, there can still be notice.
Well, if you did
So I think what you're saying is that if we were to create an agreement,
Sure.
we could include this.
Sure.
Right, if you sign an agreement or a contract that doesn't say that and it just says at will, then they don't have to.
Then you can be out the door, that day.
But your
Yeah.
whole point right now is what we could include in an agreement.
Sure.
That
Oh,
we
yeah.
would present.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So
Wh-
let's
why,
do-
why wouldn't you ask them to give you 2 weeks' notice before they terminate your relationship, so you have some time to get another
Right.
job?
I'm sure a studio would put in a clause as well that would say, if you are being terminated for the following reasons.
Then that's fine.
I
It's
mean,
usually
if you did something that was pretty terrible,
Sure.
they're not gonna
Right.
say, well, but come back for the next 2 weeks. And then
Sure.
Right.
But I've gotten some fairly tragic calls where teachers have been just let go with no notice whatsoever, and they're just out in the cold, and it's not pleasant. So something to think about.
Okay, so they're just let go, then how do you handle it? Do you say, was it in your contract? Was it verbal?
What I'll usually say is, I'll say, did you have an agreement with the studio? And usually I hear, no, I didn't have an agreement with the studio.
You didn't really have a contract with them.
Maybe nothing, yeah. So it's good to have some kind of a contract with the studio. How much are they going to pay you? When are they going to pay you? How is it calculated? Very fundamental questions. What are you? Independent contractor. And then I think the odd jobs is an important one because it creates so much just tension around the relationship. Because what happens too, a lot of times what I hear is that the odd jobs expand and the teachers just get sucked into all this stuff. And,
Like everyone.
yeah. Okay?
Like everyone.
Life, right?
Like life.
So we're running out of time a little bit. Let's see.
So maybe yoga teachers need a union?
That's a whole different.
That would make it very peaceful, wouldn't it?
Let's talk about your website really quickly. So if you are going to launch a new website, which actually you pretty much have to do in order to be an independent contractor anyways, it's really important. Because you have to have your own independent business, right? And so the website is part of that. You come up with this great name for your domain, bindayogini.com. What's the first thing you do?
You have to do a search on whether anyone else is doing business under that name.
Okay. Yes, so what do we search?
Search the URL, the domain name.
Well, when you're gonna go and buy your domain name, it's gonna search for you to see if it's been taken.
Okay, you go to GoDaddy, they say Bindi Yogini is available, $9.99, it's yours, so you buy it. Are you
Right.
cool or not?
We need to see
No.
if it's trademarked.
Yes. So just because you bought that name from GoDaddy doesn't mean that somebody doesn't have a trademark on that name. Here's a letter. I got a new client a while back. Here's the letter that I got. Hello, Gary. I was hoping I would never have to contact you, but I received a very interesting email this morning, and to be honest, I'm a little freaked out. First, a little background. I own a studio in New Mexico called Inhale Dance and Yoga for Mind, Body, and Soul. We've been in operation for a year. We're very small. We only teach classes in our one-room studio space. I received an email from Public Relations Director for Inhale Enterprises regarding trademark rights. They request that we cease to use the name Inhale as they have trademarked it. I am just wondering what to do. Thank you for any information regarding this matter, as I really do not know anything about this and I just want to teach yoga. Sincerely, Tess. So I wrote Tess back. Here's what I said. Dear Tess, well, I am sorry that you had to contact me as well.
You're in big trouble.
But when you get sick, it's always good to know a great doctor. So here, what did she fail to do?
Trademark or name.
She didn't
check.
Yeah.
to see if somebody owned the trademark to Inhale. And if somebody has that, guess what? You have to take it all down. Your website goes down. You pull all of your marketing collateral gets thrown away. Your T-shirts get thrown away. Your water bottles get thrown away. Anything with that name is pulled off the market. And they can sue you if they want to. Usually they don't, but they certainly can. So it all goes down. So here's what you do. There's something called TESS, Trademark Electronic Search Service. I think it's in those materials. It's by the Patent and Trademark Office. They have a database of all the federally registered trademarks. You can search your name on TESS and see if anybody has it. And that will filter out a lot of trouble if you do the search on TESS. Secondly, run a Google search and just see, has anybody got that name? You know.
So if you,
Please.
so if you have a website and you've given it a name, like I actually did this already. I created a website through GoDaddy and then I made my own.
Yeah.
And it has a name, createwithcynthia.com. And I don't really care that it's that name. And the only reason I chose that name was because I thought it was easy for people to remember. And so, are you saying that if I go and look on the trademark, the test system, and it's in there, I have to take it off my website?
No, what I'm saying is, if you search that name and you see that someone has trademarked that name, they own the name and you don't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Which means you're infringing their right, and if they find
By using
out,
it?
excuse me?
By using it?
Sure. And if they find that,
Just because it's a createwithcynthia.com? I mean, it's like I can't use the word. That's like saying I can't use certain words on my website just because.
No, it's like if you're calling your business a certain name,
No, I'm
you're
not
doing
calling
business as createwithcynthia.com.
No, I'm not doing that. All I did was I created a website with the name createwithcynthia.com. But my I don't have a business.
doesn't matter if you have a business or not. It's the use of the name. That name could be trademarked by someone else, and if it is, then you've infringed their trademark right, and they can force you to stop using it. Now, if you do that search and you see someone's trademarked it, you don't have to just like automatically take it down. You can just continue to use it. But I would not invest a ton of money in that brand because it's at risk, you know?
But is there any legal things they could come at? Like, I'm not planning to do any of that. I mean, I just came up with Create with Cynthia because I thought it was easy for people to remember. So,
Well, they could make you take it down, so that's
That's
what I'm
it.
saying, you wouldn't wanna build too much around it,
And
because
money
then you
too.
have to take it down.
and could they sue me as well?
They could sue you for damages, but it's pretty unlikely for what you're doing. They could demonstrate a whole lot of damages. But so in the normal case, you get a nasty cease and desist letter from some law firm, and you'd freak out and take it down.
Okay.
But any money you'd invested in that brand would be lost.
Yeah, I'm not doing that.
But if you're not going to do that, then yes.
So I have, I have a couple different businesses, and one is called Body of Sound, and it's teaching workshops in rhythm, voice, and movement. So it's kind of like being a yoga teacher, but it's just teaching other types of workshops. And I haven't yet trademarked it. I'm in the process of about to do that because my friend emailed me saying, I'm here in Western Mass, and I just noticed that there's this other woman who teaches a bunch of different things, but one of the things that she's doing, she started to call Body of Sound. So I feel like I've called my thing Body of Sound for longer than this person, and I don't think she's trademarked it.
Yeah.
And so I want to trademark it, but, I mean,
Where is this other business located?
Mine or hers?
Hers.
I think it's in Western Mass.
Okay. Well, so here's kind of a cool thing. If you have a name and you start using it, you actually get a common law trademark to that name. So if you just put TM next to it, you actually are creating an enforceable common law trademark. So you actually have an interest in that name within your market area.
Like within California? Or?
Yeah, whatever your market really is, you know. And you might say it's the whole country, but that's kind of a dispute. But whatever your market area is, you actually have a common law trademark. So if hers is in Massachusetts, yours is here, there wouldn't really be any
But what
conflict.
if, I do retreats that could be like national
So
or international retreats?
then you would have to just basically show that your common law interest was within your market. Your market includes Massachusetts. You could actually assert that against her. Weaknesses in the case, if you really want to protect that brand, then I'd go ahead and get a federal registration of that mark.
Yeah.
So for me, I could just put TM next to my name?
Yeah. You just put TM next to that mark wherever you use it, and you'll create a common law trademark interest within your market. And if someone comes in, even if they've registered that mark, if they're in your market, you will win within your market, and they will have the mark everywhere else, but you have it within your market, and it's.
If you're
And the
first
market
one to
is
put a trademark
regional.
on it, right?
What?
The market is regional. Does the internet?
Well, it's
make this
whatever
complicated?
it's whatever your actual business market is, and I know that it's gonna be really fuzzy based upon what you're doing. Like UWINS is here, right? It's just here. Yours could be a national market. You just have to demonstrate you're actually selling stuff, all across the country, versus being located here, maybe doing something occasionally somewhere else.
So if I get that federal trademark, even if she decided to do the TM in her area, would I still hold jurisdiction over that name?
Yeah, you could sue her. You could probably sue her and most likely win. All she would have is some common law mark in her market, assuming she's successfully sued.
So say I get this trademarked in the next couple weeks or something. I mean, how long does it take? I mean,
It's
like
three
a
or 4
short
months.
process, right?
Yeah.
And then it's immediate. I don't have to wait for it. Then would you recommend that I contact her before she goes too far with her name if I'm concerned about my business building?
After you register, I'd hit her with cease and desist.
Well, I mean, I'm only saying because if she just started using this before she actually starts to build too much around it, would it be a courtesy to let her know?
No, because you don't know if you're going to get the registration or not. And that might trigger her going off and trying to get her mark registered, or she might actually dispute your registration process. She can fight your process before it's been awarded, so you don't want to do that.
So when you do your Google search and you see a TM behind somebody with the same name that they just put on it, then what does that mean? Do you want to call them, get in contact, and make an agreement about regions, or?
Let's talk after class. Okay, so I wanted to very quickly go through some business points. Okay? That it's not in the materials. These are things that I think can help you build your business. Here's some ideas. I've got, I guess, five principles. Okay? I'll go through them fairly quickly. The first I call look around. And that is where you live and intend to teach, what businesses are around there. Like where I teach, Netflix is across the street. I think corporate yoga. Medical complex behind where I teach. What an incredible source of students. So look around, where you are and see, are there any opportunities? We're in Silicon Valley. What about the tech companies are really getting into mindfulness and well-being? Huge market, not completely non-tapped. So look around. What about yoga festivals? See what's going on there. Art plus music plus yoga. Great opportunities. So look around, see what's happening, look for new opportunities. Second principle, I call it find space. Find space. What about teaching yoga to black people, brown people, red people, yellow people, green people?
Big article about that one.
Because most of the demographic is fairly well-to-do white females, and there's gigantic populations that aren't being served. So consider that. What about boomers? What about men?
And what about them?
That's another topic of conversation. Different kinds of specialty yoga. These are areas where I see there's just huge opportunities for growth and to build a really viable, rich yoga practice. Third, be unique. I have this wonderful quote that I don't have with me, but it's about, the quote basically says that this person feels that yoga teachers all come from a yoga teacher factory. Because they're all like teaching the same stuff and they're all kind of the same, and it's just, it's just like, it doesn't do anything. So the notion here is find your unique self, find your authentic self, teach out of your unique self. And I've got loads and loads of examples about that. One of my favorites, I have a friend who's 75 years old. He is a keto master. Practiced the keto for over 40 years. And he wants to be a yoga teacher. And it's like, man, bring that wisdom and knowledge into the yoga class. Be incredible. That's his unique self. Find your unique self and teach from that space. Don't teach like a graduate from the yoga factory. Get inspired. Look around at great teachers who are doing cool things and use them as a source for inspiration. You can use them to help point you to your true self. And one thing that's really kind of fun to do is like look at the Yoga Journal conferences, go down that list of the 20 rock stars, and see how they got to be rock stars. It's real interesting to explore the path that they took to get to that level. And it's amazing all the ideas that you can get in terms of your path by looking what these people did. So use them as a source of inspiration. Or teachers that you know and that you take their classes and you think they're just great, use them as a source of inspiration, but always use them as a way to sort of point back to teaching out of your unique self. And the fifth, I think it comes down to having a deep personal practice. Because
what's the fourth one?
Get inspired.
Okay, inspired.
And fifth, practice. As teachers, we're all students. And the great teachers that I know have deep personal practices. They bring that into the studio, and you can feel it. And I know you guys have felt that too when you've gone into the class with master teachers. They've got that deep practice, and you really can feel it. And that's the kind of thing that really will distinguish you from teachers coming out of the Yoga Factory. So, and that takes a long time and a lot of work, but it's amazing how that affects what you're doing in the classroom. So those are my sort of very, very quick overview of sort of 5 things to consider to help build a vibrant business as a yoga teacher. Any questions?
No, we could have imagined that a talk about the profession that most of us disdain and look down upon has such a virtuous spokesperson and so eloquently and so well said.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I have lawyers in my family, and I don't disdain them at all. They have to do. And there's some bad apples.
Yeah. But this is actually kind of, I don't want to really point to myself in any way, but this is actually an example of taking something that's so contrary to yoga, like the law, but that's part of my unique self, and I found a way to sort of bring that into this space. So if a lawyer can do it,
Yeah.
anybody, can do it.
Very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm delighted. And if you have questions, feel free to send me mail. I'll be more than happy to send you forms, give you some insights, help. Just let me know.
Thank you.
The document you wrote that we sent, that we received,
This was really nice.
It was really well, it was really easy to read.
Good.
It was very helpful.
Yeah.
and
I'm
very
glad you
helpful.
like it. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Yeah.
Hope you guys enjoyed it.
I loved hearing your story too.
Thanks.
I know,
Moved
me
into
too.
this.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Beginning story.
Oh, yeah. That was.
So you had a trademark question? It was getting kind of complicated. I was running out of time.
Well, it was more hypothetical of if, one of the things you